Hey, could you be a bit more diligent with the housework? When I got home from work, I was met by my disgruntled husband. I'm sorry, I've just been so busy lately. I promise it'll calm down soon. Just bear with me. I've been working overtime continuously these past days, so I've barely had time to do house chores when I get home. I manage to do the laundry almost every day, but since it's not appropriate to vacuum late at night, I only quickly vacuum the living room on weekday mornings. For meals, I mostly resort to meal prep or takeout. Even I can't deny that I'm feeling miserably at house chores. My name is Michelle. I'm a 29-year-old office worker. I met my husband Jake, who was my middle school classmate, by chance at a cafe about 3 years ago, and we exchanged contact details. On the day we met, I was out alone watching a movie. As we live in a small town, almost everyone goes to the same large movie theater. On my way back, I noticed Jake sitting at a table next to mine at a cafe in the shopping mall where the theater was. It was like a scene from a comic book. I even wondered if it was fate. Although we exchanged contact details then, we didn't communicate much. But later on, we both attended a school reunion, and our relationship began amidst the encouragement from our friends. Jake and I got along well in the past, and we still clicked, so he proposed a year into our relationship. Perhaps because we live in a small town where people tend to get married young, I was starting to feel the pressure by my late 20s, so I accepted the proposal immediately. Of course, I love Jake. But looking back, I wish I had taken more time to understand him better. Jake, who has always lived with his parents, is practically incapable of doing housework. Since I used to live alone and have my way of doing things, I prefer to do everything myself, rather than getting half-hearted help. I only ask Jake to take out the garbage and clean the bathroom, and I take care of the rest of the housework. But a month ago, I started a busy period at work and began working overtime. A colleague also recently went on maternity leave, so there is even more work than usual during this busy period. As a result, I have less time for house chores, and it seems to annoy Jake. And finally, Jake blew up his frustration. Exhausted, I came home to hear, "Michelle, enough is enough. I'm supposed to wear this outfit tomorrow, but you didn't even wash it. All you have to do is throw it in the washer and hang it out to dry. Why can't you do that?" I didn't even have time to do the laundry yesterday as I came home late. I didn't have time this morning either, so I was planning to do it when I got home today. And another takeout meal?
Today, I worked late again, and when I brought home some takeout, that's what he said. I apologized, but Jake didn't seem to cool down.
I mean, seriously, I'm tired too when I come home, and this is how you treat me?
Jake sighed heavily as he spoke. Hearing that, I felt my blood boil. Excuse me? Then why don't you help out with the chores a little? As you said, all you have to do is throw it in the washer and hang it out to dry, right? If it's that easy, why don't you do it yourself? And you could bring dinner once in a while, couldn't you? It's not like you're supporting me financially. We're splitting the bills, and I'm doing all the chores you can't do, so stop complaining. Although I blurted it out, part of me felt relieved for speaking up. But of course, Jake didn't feel the same way.
Is that how a wife should talk?
That comment made me see red again. What do you mean? I would do that if I were a stay-at-home wife. But if I quit my job, wouldn't it be hard to live on your salary alone? We talked about not quitting my job when we married, and you agreed, didn't you? And we also agreed to help each other out when things get busy, didn't we? With that, Jake heaved a sigh.
That's so Michelle of you. If you're so keen on working, why not work by yourself? Women really should be keeping the home in order. Unlike you, Michelle, my girlfriend helps with the household chores, keeps the house spotless whenever I visit, and even made a homemade cake last time.
At that moment, I froze. Wait, what did you just say? Girlfriend? Who are you talking about? An old flame? Or are you having an affair? While my mind raced with a flurry of thoughts, Jake smirked.
You've aged, you know. She's stunning, and what's more, she's the CEO's daughter. Her parents even endorse our relationship, and they asked if I'd be interested in succeeding the CEO.
And then, shockingly, Jake produced divorce papers.
That's why, fill these out. I'll be leaving tomorrow.
Caught off guard, my mind was stuck in disbelief. Hold on a minute. Jake, are you saying you're having an affair? And you're divorcing me to marry your mistress? Jake laughed mockingly.
That's right. I'll even pay whatever you want. I'm the future CEO after all.
You think I'll just accept this and sign the papers? I retorted, but Jake remained unfazed.
So, you want to keep living like this? You think life with me, who has lost affection for you and yourself, worn out by work and chores, is enjoyable?
I stuttered, unsure of what to say. He was right, though. Our loveless relationship was only causing stress. I thought about it long and hard, but I grew wary of thinking any more. I responded impassively, fine, but I'll file for divorce once I've sorted things out, like asset division and alimony. I'm too busy with work right now, so you'll have to wait. Jake, looking exasperated, replied,
Yeah, always putting work first. I'll leave the papers here. Let me know when you file them.
He then left the living room for the bedroom. Some time passed, work settled down, and I found a lawyer through a friend's recommendation. The lawyer, who specialized in divorce, listened to my story, and we decided to demand more alimony than average. I had anticipated Jake to negotiate the price, but surprisingly, he agreed to the amount. Is it really true that he's being considered for the next CEO? I felt a pang of regret, but decided to let it go. If I'm getting a decent amount, I might as well go on a vacation alone and refresh myself. Half a month since Jake left the apartment, just as work was settling down and the alimony negotiations ended, the empty apartment started to feel lonely. I should move, I decided. There's no point in staying here. It's too big for one and feels hollow. Luckily, I can take time off work now, so I should move while I have the chance. I headed to a real estate agent and signed a lease for an apartment closer to my office. I moved a week later. I had to inform Jake about the move as the apartment was under his name. Immediately after, he called.
Do you really think moving out of our memories-filled apartment is the right choice? Isn't it lonely living alone in a strange place? I'm sure you haven't forgotten me, so you might as well dwell in the past.
Jake and his arrogance looked down on me and spoke with such condescension. Yes, dealing with these sudden events was tough, but as the days turned into weeks, I found myself getting angrier. I realized I had no affection left for Jake. No matter how much I told him that I've moved on, Jake only responded with conceited remarks like,
"Stop hiding it,"
or
"Don't play tough."
I was so annoyed by the conversation that I firmly said, "Could you just pay the alimony soon? Once you do, I can file the divorce papers."
Yeah, got it. I'll pay within this week, so prepare the divorce papers. My girlfriend's parents say we should live together only after we're officially married, so I'm living in a hotel now. Quit my job too, currently in a recharging phase, I suppose.
Apparently, Jake had quit his job since moving out to prepare for his career change. And then he said he wants to submit the marriage license, have a grand wedding, and start their newlywed life in the mansion owned by his mistress's father. He's in a hurry to submit the marriage license. He also said that the meeting between the two families has already happened, but something about his story feels off. Jake's parents are dependable people, and it's odd to think they would go along with the meeting for a second marriage even before the divorce is finalized. I asked Jake, but his answer was vague, so the truth remains unknown. Well, maybe Jake's parents also hope for his remarriage with the president's daughter more than I do. I thought I had built a reasonably good relationship with my in-laws, so this was somewhat saddening.
But it doesn't matter anymore. I told him I'll contact you once I submit the divorce papers and hung up the phone. A few days later, having received the alimony, I submitted the divorce papers. This officially ends my tie with Jake. When I contacted him, he responded with a flustered, "Understood." Judging from the way he spoke last time, he will probably remarry soon. The next day, for a change of pace, I went shopping at a mall. Unexpectedly, I bumped into Jake. As I was walking around the mall, someone called out to me from the front. "Michelle, have you aged again? You're really looking like an old hag now." When I looked up at hearing these words, it was Jake. This shopping mall is the largest one around here. It's where Jake and I once reunited, where the movie theater is located. I cursed my bad timing. Jake laughed in a mocking way, said, "Today I got remarried to Olivia, the president's daughter. Unlike you, she's beautiful and the best wife." As soon as he said this, a woman carrying shopping bags approached Jake. So this is the famous president's daughter. She's certainly beautiful, but as I looked at her, thinking her name sounded familiar, our eyes met. She also seemed a bit surprised. Could it be? While I was watching her, Jake, oblivious, continued talking. "Olivia's family owns the company that you know." Ignoring Olivia's murmuring, "Let's go," Jake informed me about Olivia's family. "I'm going to be the next president of the company. Can you believe it?" The moment Jake said this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Jake, with a blank look on his face, and Olivia avoiding my gaze. "So, you've remarried already. Good for you. You got a beautiful wife. She doesn't look like she's the same age as me at all." When I said this, Jake looked puzzled. Of course he would. I had mentioned the age of his new wife without him telling me. I continued laughing. "Ah, my condolences." And then I turned my back to Jake and started walking. However, Jake, ignoring Olivia's attempts to stop him, chased after me. "Michelle, what does this mean? You know her?" I told him about the high school we both attended. We were classmates. Well, you wouldn't recognize her by her face. Jake was astonished. "It's good you got a beautiful wife, but she'd better be after all the money she spent on plastic surgery." In fact, Olivia and I were high school classmates. I didn't recognize her at first by her face, but when Jake talked about Olivia's family, it clicked. I've always disliked Olivia, who flaunted her wealth. I was somewhat prominent back then due to my achievements in the sports club, and it seems Olivia didn't like that. She used to pick on me, saying that I lacked femininity because I was in the sports club, and a lot more. Olivia had this habit of belittling others, which led many of our classmates to despise her. At our recent reunion, Olivia, who had not attended, became the talk of the day. Apparently, she'd had plastic surgery to deal with her facial complex and was now a regular on the party scene. Remember the girl Jay called ugly when he saw my graduation album? I recall telling him that she was the CEO's daughter. Jake, at this memory, turned pale. "Even if she's rich, I wouldn't want that face," he had said. As the memory returned to Jake, he reddened and yelled at Olivia. "Were you deceiving me all along?" A heated argument ensued between Jake and Olivia. From their argument, it seemed they had met at one of these parties, and Olivia was completely infatuated with Jake. Olivia, in a remarkable bout of audacity, retorted, "I didn't lie. I just didn't say because you didn't ask." Jake was about to burst with anger, but Olivia cut him off. "I've been waiting all this while for you to finally break up with Michelle, your living girlfriend. Besides, it's settled that I'll work at my father's company. I can even live in a luxury apartment. It doesn't matter now. The worst part is finding out Michelle is your girlfriend. Small world, huh?" I felt something was off. "Wait, does Olivia not know you're divorced, Jake?" At this, Jake hurriedly tried to silence me, but I revealed that I was once married to Jake and had filed for divorce just the day before. Olivia was left speechless. I continued, "In fact, I called Jake's mother yesterday to inform her about the divorce. She told me she had no knowledge of any remarriage, let alone meeting Olivia's parents. I had thought of identifying Jake's mistress and claiming damages from her, but since Jake agreed to a higher compensation than market rate, I didn't bother looking into his affair. But to think he was hiding his marital status? That's marital fraud, isn't it?" After they turned pale and bickered a bit, I decided to leave the scene. A few days later, I was contacted by Olivia through one of our classmates. "Please don't tell anyone about this." And I received a sum of money she referred to as compensation for my troubles. More like hush money, I suppose. But I had no intention of telling anyone anyway, and getting paid for my silence was a bonus. Olivia ranted about Jake to me at that time. Apparently, the parents Jake had brought for the meet and greet were not his actual parents, but were hired from a family rental service. I was surprised such a service existed, but it made me wonder if Jake had wanted to marry Olivia, or if he was just after the CEO's position. Though Olivia was in love with Jake, it remained a question whether Jake was attracted to Olivia's looks and status. Olivia, who had since begun her marital life, could not do household chores at all, and this realization enraged Jake. Her cleaned house and homemade cakes were all the work of her housemaid. In the end, Jake and Olivia divorced almost immediately, and Jake was sued for marital fraud. Despite the hush money, Olivia spilled the beans, and apparently her father was livid. It was rumored that Jake might find it difficult to continue living in this town. Now, he was living in a cheap apartment, working day and night, and he was at his breaking point. He asked me to return the divorce settlement. I responded, "What? You must be joking. I have zero intentions of helping you. Never contact me again," and hung up. Since then, I used my accumulated paid leave for a personal recharge period. I took a trip on my own and experienced new things. There were wonderful encounters, and I have a feeling that my life ahead will be exciting. I got married right after graduating from community college. Back in the day, it was expected for a woman to get married young. People may call it misogynism, but unmarried women over 30 were often mocked and ridiculed. So, when I was told to consider getting an arranged marriage before graduation, I obediently agreed. The resume of the man I was to meet stated that he graduated from a prestigious university and joined a top-tier company, where he was seen as a promising rookie. But when I met him, he was just an ordinary-looking man. Nothing really stood out. Still, he didn't seem like a bad person, and more importantly, my parents were the ones suggesting him, so I decided to marry him. Honestly, I wasn't quite looking forward to getting married. It's because I had seen how my father treated my mother. In my eyes, the head of the family, my father, seems like nothing more than an authoritarian figure at home. Indeed, once I got married, my husband acted just like my father, bossing around and not helping around the house at all. Even though I knew it was the norm, submitting myself to being ordered around wasn't pleasant. Eventually, I got pregnant and gave birth to a boy. My in-laws were overjoyed, particularly because we had a male heir. My parents also smiled with joy at the birth of their grandchild. My husband also complimented me, saying, "Well done," which was a rare thing for him to say. As for me, I only felt relief from the long hours of labor and discomfort. Child rearing was another challenge. My husband believes that child rearing was a wife's job, so he didn't help at all. In fact, he complained about not being able to sleep due to the sound of nighttime feedings. When the baby cried, he blamed me, saying, "You're the problem. Take proper care of him."
Now I had to look after both my husband and baby, and it was overwhelming. I complained to my mother sometimes, but she just said, "It's a phase everyone goes through." Still, thankfully, my child grew very quickly. Before I knew it, he started crawling, then standing and walking. Just as I thought things might get easier when he starts preschool, I found out I was pregnant again. My days were occupied with watching my toddler wander around, looking after him, doing housework, caring for my husband, all while carrying a big belly. It was intensive labor. Nevertheless, time passed, and my kids graduated from preschool and entered elementary school, then junior high and high school. My eldest son went on to major in economics at a renowned university, and then secured a job at a famous company. My daughter was told to attend a community college by my father, but she went against him. My daughter insisted that she wanted to work part-time to pay for her own tuition and pursue her studies at a 4-year college. It was the first time I had ever voiced my opinion to my husband since our marriage. Women are now making their marks in companies and other places, so please let her go to a 4-year college, I pleaded with my husband. However, he berated me, saying, "You have no say in this. What could someone as ignorant as you possibly know?" But I didn't back down. For my daughter, I fought hard. As a result, under the condition of securing a scholarship, my daughter was able to attend a 4-year college. She continued to receive scholarships for 4 years and graduated from college with good grades. She then secured a job at a major corporation. "Thank you, Mom. I promise to repay this kindness. I'll never forget how you supported my college education and job hunting." My daughter told me as she left home for her job. Those words alone made me feel like 30 years of my hardship since getting married got rewarded. Now that my 2 children had left home, I suddenly found myself with a lot of free time. Of course, I still had to take care of my husband as before. But compared to when I was also raising children, it became significantly easier. With all the free time on my hands, I started talking more with the ladies in my neighborhood. When I mentioned that I had become completely idle, the lady next door suggested, "Why not try working part-time? The supermarket over there is always hiring. I actually work there 3 times a week." That's what she told me. I had never worked part-time before, but I had always wanted to earn my own money. When I gathered my courage and mentioned my interest of working part-time to my husband, he said, "It's disgraceful for a married woman to work. It makes it seem like I'm not making enough money," and frowned upon me. But when I insisted that other ladies in our neighborhood were working as well, and it was a waste not to use my free time, my husband thought about it. He then said, "I don't think you can handle working a job, but go ahead and try. You'll probably be called incompetent and get fired right away," and laughed maliciously. He's always been like this, never approving whenever I tried to do something, always saying it was impossible or that I lacked the ability. But this time he somewhat approved, and I thought maybe he had softened a bit with age. In the end, I started working part-time at the local supermarket 3 times a week during the day. The hourly wage isn't that bad for a cash register and stocking job. While restocking, there were times when my back ached from carrying and lifting heavy loads. And at times, some of the young male student staffs would help me with the heavy lifting. I found it strangely refreshing to see that not all men were like my husband. And getting to talk with other part-time ladies during break time was new to me and fun as well. There were people of all ages, ranging from 20s to 60s, so the conversations were diverse too. Especially the young ones were surprised when I told them that I got married right after graduating from community college and this was my first job. "I mean, you are incredibly patient. I could never date a man who's as domineering as your husband." The young ones all agreed, saying, "Absolutely." Those of us who were older just weakly laughed and said, "It used to be the norm back in our days." However, there was one thing that troubled me about starting this part-time job. My husband stops giving the same amount of money for household expenses, saying, "You're earning now." He laughingly added that it was only fair for me to contribute to the household expenses since he had allowed me to work. I was disappointed because I had been looking forward to having some money of my own. One of the women in her 30s, who often works the same shift as me, noticed my downcast mood and asked what was wrong. I was a bit embarrassed to talk about money, but I wanted to vent, so I told her about my situation. She asked me, "Wait a second, do you always do what your husband says?" I answered, "Well, I'm his wife," and she put her hands on her head. "Look, it's not normal these days to have such a sexist mindset. I have to tell you, it's a clear case of emotional abuse." She explained in detail about emotional abuse, and I finally understood that my husband's behavior over the years was indeed abusive. I was astonished at the realization that I had been a victim of emotional abuse. Around this time, I noticed my husband was up to something suspicious. He seemed to have started going out at night, perhaps because he had more pocket money now that he was giving less to the household. One time, I found several cards from strip clubs in his suit's pocket. There were times when he came home reeking of perfume, but I thought to myself, if it were my father, he would say, "A little nightlife is just a man proving his masculinity." I was sure my husband would say the same thing. It would be easy to confront him about it, but doing so would likely only result in him finding an excuse or getting angry. I had been enduring here as well. Due to such circumstances, my stress had accumulated, and I suppose it had exhausted my body. One day, while at work, a severe pain ran through my lower back, rendering me immobile. My manager and part-time colleagues were worried for me and urged me to leave early to see a doctor. I was grateful for their concern for me and left early as they suggested. I lay down at home, then the pain felt like it had slightly gotten better. I was relieved, thinking it was just back pain, and proceeded to prepare dinner. However, the pain returned as soon as I bent over. The pain was unbearable, and I found myself laying on the floor again. And of all days, my husband happened to come home early today. Upon seeing me laying in the kitchen, he angrily asked, "What are you doing in such a miserable state?" When I complained about my severe back pain, he retorted, "It's because you're working part-time at this age. You've brought this upon yourself." Knowing that dinner was not ready, he stormed out of the house again. I was at a loss, but in my immobile state, I had no choice but to call an ambulance. I crawled to the entrance, and while waiting for the ambulance, tears started falling due to the pain and frustration. My husband, who had left his wife writhing in pain, and myself. Not once in 30 years of being together have I ever been able to speak up against my husband, and that made me angry with myself. The paramedics were shocked to see me lying alone at the entrance and hurriedly loaded me onto the stretcher and took me to the emergency hospital. Upon examination, it turned out to be an acute herniated disc. The doctor said to me, "You've endured this well." Acute hernias are extremely painful, and there are people who can't even call an ambulance because they can't move. "It was unfortunate that this happened while your husband was not at home." That's what the doctor said, but I just gave a vague smile. At this time, I felt my built-up frustration crossing the limit and overflowing. That day, I received an IV painkiller and a strong painkiller prescription before I went home. Thankfully, with the help of the painkiller, I was able to somewhat move around. When my husband came home late at night, he spewed at me, "You were overreacting and even slacked off making dinner." The next day, I called my part-time job and told my manager about my herniated disc. I think it's better to quit for now, so as not to be an inconvenience for others. When I said this, my manager replied, "No, it's fine. We'll take it as a leave. We can't let go of a hard-working worker like you." From his kind words, I was moved to tears. Fortunately, thanks to the painkillers and some good rest, the pain gradually subsided. By the time 2 weeks had passed, although there was still pain, I could move around just fine. I returned to my part-time job, and everyone cared enough to not let me handle any heavy items. I'm grateful for everyone's kindness. To this, they all replied with a laugh. "What are you talking about? Of course we wouldn't make a recovering person take on hard labor." I didn't mention that there was someone at home who couldn't say or do those thoughtful things. A month after my emergency hospitalization, we had to call for an ambulance again at our house. It seems that my husband's night out had taken a toll on him. He started complaining of back pain as soon as he got home.
Call an ambulance.
Reluctantly, I called an ambulance for him. Then I said to my husband, "You told me it was shameful to make a fuss over this level of pain." As for my husband, either he didn't hear my words or he was just too busy groaning in pain. In less than 10 minutes, the ambulance arrived and the paramedics brought a stretcher. When they heard my husband couldn't stand due to back pain, they quickly put him on a stretcher and loaded him into the ambulance. Then, turning to me, "Ma'am, please join us in the ambulance," one of them said. I smiled and firmly replied, "No, I won't accompany him." The paramedic looked puzzled, but my husband's groans seemed to prioritize their attention. They quickly drove off. I went back into the house, entered my room, and picked up a bag I had prepared for this day. Inside were my bank book, some cash, and my phone. All that was left to grab was a small suitcase, a luggage with some clothes, and other essentials. Before leaving, I left a document and a note on the living room table. Then I called my daughter. "Can I come over now?" My daughter, delighted, said, "Come right away." My daughter always told me, "Don't stick with that man any longer. It's better to leave." I left home without looking back. After settling in at my daughter's apartment and telling her about how much my husband had been moaning in pain, she laughed heartily and said, "That's karma for treating you like a workhorse and making a fool out of you." From that night, my phone was flooded with emails and calls from my husband. His calls became so incessant that I had to block them, as my daughter had suggested. Just to be safe, my daughter also reached out to our eldest son. Initially, our son was sympathetic to my husband, perhaps out of some misguided sense of male camaraderie. However, once my daughter explained the whole fiasco of both mine and my husband's back injuries, he tersely dismissed it with, "Dad's in the wrong." About a week later, I decided to visit our home. I had to retrieve the divorce papers I had left there. I figured my husband would be home on a Sunday, and luckily he was. And the first thing he said to me was, "You regret leaving, don't you? I'll forgive you and let you come back." He sat there smugly as he said it. Looking at the state of the house, I couldn't help but sigh. It had only been a week, but the living room was littered with trash and my husband's clothes. The kitchen appeared to be unused, but the sink was filled with piles of cutlery and dishes. I was sure then that my husband wasn't just emotionally abusive, but also incapable of taking care of himself too. So I said to him, "Hand me the divorce papers I left." My husband sat there, mouth agape. At his dumbfounded expression, I couldn't help but laugh. Furious, he shouted back at me, "After all these years I've provided for you, how could you do this to me? I could sue you." I responded calmly, "I'm the one with the right to sue you here. Your behavior is pure emotional abuse, and even just for that, I could claim damages in today's world. Besides, look at this place." I looked around the room. "You're so helpless, you can't even manage basic chores. Don't act high and mighty. You can't even live right without me. So here's something else for you." I handed him a piece of paper. It was a bill, converting almost 30 years of my housework into an hourly wage. I should tell you, I've recorded the harsh words you said to me over the past year on my phone. My lawyer assured me that the contents alone make for sufficient evidence of your emotional abuse. Isn't that right, sir? I looked back at the entrance of the living room. I had also asked the lawyer to come as a witness, and just in case my husband tried to resort to physical violence. Seeing the stern look on the lawyer's face, my husband attempted to defend himself. "It's a wife's duty to obey her husband. Don't start with this nonsense about emotional abuse." The lawyer sighed heavily. "Ma'am, this is no good. He doesn't seem to understand what he's done wrong. I think you should just go ahead and sue him." My husband widened his eyes and then hung his head low. As is often the case with people of older generations, my husband couldn't speak against someone who was of higher class than him, especially not against the authority of the law or a lawyer. Eventually, our divorce was finalized on the grounds of his emotional abuse. I demanded compensation for the years of housework I had done and for the emotional distress he had caused me. After discussions between our lawyers, all my demands were met,
His lawyer, too, seemed fed up with his attitude. My ex-husband had apparently sought help from our son, but he told him, "I'm siding with Mom on this one." After the divorce, my ex-husband couldn't even clean up after himself, and his house eventually turned into a place full of trash. However, it seems he's somehow managing to go to work. From what I've heard, he's gotten sloppy and unhygienic, and because of that, he's been moved to a less demanding role at work. Also, the word got around in his office about the divorce due to his emotional abuse, which might result in him getting fired even before his retirement. Meanwhile, I am living happily with my daughter. Sometimes my son also gives us a call, and I am spending my days working at a part-time job where everyone is kind.
Hey, did you go drinking again? It's the third time this week. When I come home and see that I have to deal with someone like you, an annoying old woman, I can't help but feel disgusted. I have to drink just to tolerate it. Lately, it's been every weekend, and now even on weekdays. Men have social obligations, you know. I work too, you know. Sometimes you should come home early and be a companion for Tom. What do I care? Taking care of the child is the wife's job. Lately, my husband and I have been arguing like this every day. We've been married for 12 years, and his habit of wasting money is a constant headache for me. I'm Kelly, 36 years old. I've continued working even after getting married. My husband is 2 years older than me. Since we aged together and he calls me an old woman, it naturally makes me think he's an old man. Even though I try not to retort in the same way to avoid escalating the argument, we still constantly disagree on matters related to money and our child. I work for a fairly large company, and they have a good maternity and childcare leave system. So my return to work after having a child went smoothly. I have no complaints about my job. My husband also works for the same company, but he changed departments after my return, so we rarely see each other at work. My husband is currently in the sales department, so he has more social commitments than me in the general affairs department, and I understand that he often can't leave work on time. But still, I can't help but think about it. My husband has never once helped with dropping off or picking up our child from daycare. Hey, why don't you pick up our child from time to time? That's your job. Besides, I never even wanted a child in the first place. But the child is already born. It's pointless to say that now. You said that seeing him would make me feel attached, but that is not true. I don't feel attached to him at all. He doesn't even like me. That's because you never play with him. Even when Tom tries to talk to you, you ignore him. I want to relax on my days off. I can't be bothered to take care of the child. Our only son, Tom, is now in the 4th grade of elementary school. He's at an age where he can understand many things. He's surely aware that his father is indifferent towards him. Tom used to talk to him a lot when he was younger, but my husband would just give short and dismissive responses. Hey, Dad, listen! What? I'm watching TV right now. Don't bother me. I'm sorry. Hey, you can't say things like that. Shut up! I'm tired from work every day. Unlike you in the general affairs department, sales requires a lot of consideration. Don't make me tired, even on my days off. It's the same old story. My husband is completely uninvolved in school events and parenting. He has never attended a parent-teacher day or a sports day. It feels like I'm practically a single mother. Even our son has stopped initiating conversations with his father. On top of that, my husband splurges on himself without buying anything for his son. He bosses around the house, and my frustrations keep growing. I try not to complain too much, but I can't help but do so, and there's a reason for that. Actually, when our child turned 3 years old, my husband's debt came to light. Since we both work, we split the living expenses, so I didn't know how my husband was using his salary. But since our child was born, our living expenses increased accordingly. Naturally, our respective shares of the expenses increased as well. We had an agreement to deposit predetermined amounts into a shared account for living expenses. However, even though we only increased it by $200 since our child was born, my husband frequently failed to deposit money on the specified date. When I confronted him, it was revealed that he had debt before we got married. What's more, the debt was still close to $30,000. When I asked him what the debt was for, how much he has been paying each month, and when he expects to pay it off, he just laughed foolishly and said it seemed like it would never end. Well, I've been paying it off with revolving payments, so even if I pay, the balance doesn't decrease at all. What? For a moment, I couldn't believe what this man was saying. In short, he's been making purchases every month that exceed his payments, but because he pays it off with revolving payments, the amount he pays remains the same, and as a result, the balance hasn't been decreasing, but rather increasing over the years. I was filled with anger at how reckless he was. He didn't even have the awareness of being a father. To prevent further wasteful spending, I stopped all the credit cards he had at the time. Even though he grumbled quite a bit, I sternly asked him what he would do if the debt continued to increase and somehow managed to prevent him from using them. If it were money spent for the family, it would be one thing, but this was debt accumulated for his own luxury. It's only natural for an adult to take care of it themselves. However, because I wanted to repay it as soon as possible, I increased the monthly payment amount, so I ended up covering the majority of the living expenses. It has been 7 years since then, and the debt has long been paid off. Yet, the amount of money my husband contributes for living expenses is less than before. When I asked him to increase the money he covers for the living expenses, he came up with the excuse that I earn more and stubbornly refused to increase it. He thinks it's only natural for the one with a higher salary to contribute more as a family. My husband's sales performance is not great either. He's been left behind by his peers and is just rotting away, so he's not committed to his work. That's why he hasn't been promoted. I was promoted to the General Affairs Department manager 2 years ago. As a result, my salary increased compared to my husband's. However, my husband wasn't pleased with that either. I tried to give him advice to motivate him, but he didn't like that either. He said, "What do you know about sales? Don't meddle unnecessarily," and completely ignored my words. Since everything I said only led to arguments, I gradually became less inclined to say anything. Then, one day, my husband told me he was going back to his hometown for a high school reunion. To be clear, his parents had already passed away, and his older brother and his wife live in the family home. My husband and his brother don't get along well and have no interaction at all. They had a dispute over the inheritance when their father passed away 5 years ago. His brother and his wife had been taking care of my mother-in-law, who required nursing care for many years. My husband had completely stayed out of it. I also felt sorry about it, but I had work and couldn't easily go and help. Since our child was born, I had been handling most things on my own, so I couldn't visit my in-laws much, and my mother-in-law passed away 3 years before my father-in-law. That was 1 year before my husband's death came to light. So apparently, my father-in-law had left a will stating that all the assets should be left to my brother-in-law and his wife. I thought it was only natural and told my husband it was okay. However, my husband didn't like that and made outrageous claims. In the end, they reached an agreement to my brother-in-law paying the rightful share, But my brother-in-law got angry at my husband's attitude at the time and told him not to be involved anymore. Knowing all of that, I feel uncomfortable seeing my brother-in-law and his wife, and I haven't had any contact with them since my father-in-law passed away. With the money my husband received at that time, he settled his remaining debt. That's when I found out that even though he claimed he couldn't contribute to living expenses because he increased his revolving payment, he still had over half of the balance remaining. It was a ridiculous lie. He hadn't been contributing to living expenses under the pretense of increasing payments, but had been using it for his own entertainment expenses. It was absurd. When I complained about it, he shamelessly said, "Well, in the end, it got settled, didn't it? And it's because you stopped me from using my cards that my available money decreased. I have no choice but to get it from the living expenses." He completely brushed it off. That's how my brother-in-law cut ties with us. So even if he says he's going back to his hometown, there's no way he can stay at his family home. When I asked where he would be staying, he said he had booked a hotel nearby. It was somewhat sad to think that he couldn't even visit the house where he was born and raised, especially since he was returning to his hometown. However, I chose not to mention it and saw him off. "Daddy, aren't you leaving home today?" "Yeah, that's right." As I watched my husband happily leave, our son called out to him from behind. What's more, our son seems somewhat pleased to know that his father wouldn't be coming home. It made me realize, once again, that my son didn't want his father to be around. And I realized that I felt the same way. Since it's Saturday and Mommy doesn't have work, why don't we go out and dine out? Really? Yeah. Yay! Feeling relieved that my husband isn't around, I started to think seriously about our future. But since that high school reunion day, my husband started going out more often. He goes out a lot, especially on his days off, and stays out all night more often. He seems unusually cheerful, and he keeps his cell phone close to him, whereas before he used to leave it lying around on the table. It seems like he even takes it with him to the bathroom and shower. It's suspicious, no matter how you look at it. "Hey, you have been going out more often lately, haven't you? Where do you go?" Just thought I'd work out a bit, so I've been going to the gym on my days off. You know, when you're in your late 30s, your physical strength starts to decline." "Oh, really? Do gyms have accommodations too?" "No. But sometimes I end up having drinks with friends all night. When you are in good shape, you can drink more." "I see. Are you going to keep exercising and play sports with Tom too?" Yeah. That could be an option." His eyes were evasive. I looked at him with a cold gaze, thinking that if it was a lie, he could have come up with a better one. In my mind, my husband's affair was already confirmed. I could have hired a private investigator, but for the time being, I decided to follow him when he goes out. My husband boarded the train and got off at the station near his parents' house. There, a young woman was waiting in a car, and my husband happily got into the car. Since his behavior had changed after the reunion, I had assumed the woman was a former classmate, but she now clearly appeared to be in her 20s. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but think, he spends recklessly, doesn't spend time with our son, and now I suspect he's cheating. It has become ridiculous to even be together. I made up my mind to leave my husband and started preparing for it. "Well, I'm heading out. I might stay at a friend's place tonight." "Oh, I see. Take care." It was the perfect opportunity, or so I thought. However, just then, I discovered that my credit card was missing from my wallet. I remember having it there until yesterday. Since I hadn't taken it out or used it, I couldn't think of anywhere I might have lost it. I immediately contacted the credit card company and reported it as lost. They asked me for the last time I used it, but I couldn't remember exactly when it was. I checked the transaction records on my computer and provided them with the information. Fortunately, they informed me that it hadn't been used since then, so that was a relief. I hadn't lost it or taken it out of my wallet, so why did it disappear? There was only one answer, without even having to think about it. My husband must have taken it from my wallet. It was the only explanation I could come up with. I thought that my husband would do it. For the past 6 months or so, my husband had been receiving collection letters from various credit card companies. I guess his own cards had reached their credit limit. When he settled his debt, he must have secretly applied for new cards, and not just one, but several. I had chosen to ignore it, thinking that since he would be the one paying it off, there was no need to say anything. But stealing someone else's card? That just makes him a plain thief. In any case, I'm glad I noticed it early. I started packing my husband's belongings right away. I know where he is. I had a private investigation agency find out who my husband's affair partner is. She's a 26-year-old woman who lives near his parents' house. She's about a decade younger than my husband. According to the investigation report, the woman he's been seeing is divorced and apparently moved back to her parents' house last year. Scott probably met her while she was working at the business hotel, where he stayed for a high school reunion. They lived in the same neighborhood and knew each other by sight, so they might have had an enjoyable chat. Scott has been frequently visiting her parents' house. He has known her parents by sight since he was a child, so maybe he feels comfortable going there. But do her parents let him stay over, even though they know he's still married? Well, that doesn't matter. I loaded Scott's belongings into the truck that arrived shortly and sent them off. Next up is our turn. I've canceled the credit card. Shall we move out too, Tom? Yeah, let's do that. Tom seems quite excited. When I told him we're going to live separately from his father, he responded, absolutely. Just as Scott had long ceased to be my husband in my heart, he had ceased to be a father in Tom's eyes. I regretted that I didn't make this decision sooner. By nightfall, we had moved in our new place. We had completely moved out of the house we had been renting, turned off all utilities, and returned the keys in the presence of the real estate agent. While Tom and I were discussing what to have for dinner, a call came from Scott. Hey! What the hell is this? Why are you sending me my stuff? Everyone here is shocked. Well, you seem to be spending a lot of nights there. I thought it would be convenient if you had your personal belongings there. Stop kidding! Because of you, now Marilyn's parents know that I'm still married. You put the divorce papers in the shipment. Anyway, how did you know where I am? I hired a private investigator. Scott seemed to think his affair was still a secret. I was taken too lightly. Your actions are obvious. I was certain about the affair, but I didn't want to bother investigating who the woman was, as I also have a job. Besides, I wanted solid proof. Proof? It's better to have evidence of the affair to get as much educational expenses for our son as possible. When I come home, you'll pay for this. Home? Where's that? Of course, I mean our house. Oh, I see. You still had the intention of coming back home. That's surprising. Just as the saying goes, it seemed like my husband Scott came back to our home the following day. He must have been shocked to see our old house. Despite the fact that I had sent him filled out divorce papers, it puzzles me why he would think that I would still be in that house. What's more, he tried to use my card today, and was embarrassed to find out that it didn't work. Well, of course, I reported the card as missing. Oh, and I also reported it as stolen to the police. What? Scott's voice was high-pitched. It was obvious that he was anxious about possibly being arrested. But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be satisfied unless he felt at least that much. I did report it to the police, but sadly they said that as Scott was a family member, he wouldn't be charged with theft. Furthermore, according to the credit card company, if a family member living with you steals and uses your credit card, it's considered the card owner's responsibility. so the charges won't be waived, which means that I have to pay. I wish I had noticed before it had been used. Scott's infidelity was proven, and the divorce went smoothly. I reported my divorce to the company. As my last name would change, it's a rule to report it as soon as possible when a divorce happens. Incidentally, when I was asked the reason, I slipped out because of Scott's infidelity, and the news quickly spread throughout the company. As a result, Scott has earned the scorn of his colleagues and seems to be getting a lot of cold looks. Furthermore, our company has strict ethical guidelines, so Scott has been demoted and reassigned to work in a branch office. Up until now, I had been paying for most of our living expenses, so naturally, if he continues to spend money as he did before, he will run out. He seems to have finally realized this. In addition to being demoted and having his salary further reduced, he seems to be living in poverty due to having to pay child support, and for the lavish spending he did with his own card. He's been late with his payment. His car has been suspended, and he can't get a new one because he's failing all the credit checks. He contacted me asking to lower the educational expenses for our son, but I couldn't care less, and there's no way I would lower it. Naturally, I firmly refused. Then, he had the audacity to say that he broke up with the woman he cheated on me with and wanted to reconcile with me. That's even more unthinkable. "Never contact me again," I said, and hung up the phone. The woman Scott cheated with not only knew Scott was married, but also hadn't told her parents. It seems that her previous divorce was due to her own infidelity as well, and her parents were furious when they found out. They disowned her and kicked her out of the house. Whether she got my contact information from Scott or not, she also directly called me to ask me to reduce the educational expenses for our son. It's simply unimaginable that she would even come to me with such a request. I refused, naturally, and she was sobbing on the other end of the line. Oh boy. I truly realized how tough being divorced is. Even so, now I'm living a very enjoyable life every day with my son, Tom. Tom seems to be much more relaxed and happier than when his dad was at home. If I had thought from the beginning that he wasn't there, there wouldn't be anything to expect. So it's truly refreshing. I plan to keep working hard at raising my son and my job from now on.
"2 months after our wonderful wedding, I divorced my husband. Why, you ask? He lied to me about working overtime while he was actually cheating on me. No wonder he suddenly turned cold right after our honeymoon. To get back at him, I managed to get evidence of his affair with my friend's help and laid out the perfect plan. Stay tuned, all right, honey? I'll make sure you regret betraying me. My name is Anne. I'm 25 years old. Just recently, I married Bob after dating him for 4 years, and we started our newlywed life. Bob and I went to the same university, and we were in the same college department. Even after starting our careers, we continued to date, and naturally it led to marriage. We received blessings from many people, held our ceremony, and immediately left for our honeymoon. We headed to Alaska. Because of COVID, we refrained from going abroad and stayed within the country. My husband seemed to enjoy our first trip to Alaska so much that he kept saying, "Get a picture of me," everywhere we went. He never really liked having his picture taken, so I was surprised, but I knew it was going to be a sweet memory for us to look back on. So I took many pictures of him wherever we went. But I just had one thing that bothered me. It was nice to see him all excited, but for some reason, he only wanted solo shots. So I suggested, "Hey Bob, since we're on our honeymoon, why don't we take pictures together?" Then he mumbled, Well that's fine too, but I want solo shots of myself." "Why do you only want solo shots?" "Oh, it's not like I was thinking about sending these pictures to Mom and Dad." "Then there's no problem if I'm in them too." "All right, fine. Get in the picture then." In the end, my husband became sulky and reluctantly took a picture with me. Even though it was our honeymoon, the pictures of us together didn't have the best expressions. Why would he get so angry? I just wanted to have pictures of us as memories, since it's our once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon. Besides, if he's sending them to his parents, it's obviously better to send pictures of us both looking happy. Even though our marriage life had just begun, a storm cloud had already formed over us. Since returning from the trip, my husband's been acting weird. We had some arguments during the trip and I was worried, but it didn't seem like he was upset with me. More like he was hiding something from me. I knew he was busy with work, but he constantly worked overtime and went to business trips on a short notice. On top of that, he often left the house saying, "I'm going out with my friends." On his days off, we used to always have dinner together, but I was now eating alone. Although we were newlyweds, I was spending more time alone, and I started to feel very lonely. If things continue this way, we'll only drift apart. I should be honest with my husband about how I feel. That day, I continued to wait for my husband's return, and before I knew it, it was 1 a.m. With the sound of the front door opening, my husband came home. "Welcome home, honey," I called out to him. "Oh, Anne, you're still up." "Yes, I have something I want to talk about." "Something you want to talk about?" My husband seemed slightly flustered, but he took off his suit and asked, "What is it?" Looking into my husband's eyes, I honestly expressed my current feelings. "You know, ever since we came back from our honeymoon, we've been spending less time together." "Ah, yeah. I've been busy with overtime and stuff." "But don't you think it's too frequent? You never had to work late or travel this much before we got married." "What can I do? It's crunch time now. I have to work hard for a promotion." "Even so." "Are we done talking now? I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." My husband ended the conversation and went to the bathroom. I was left alone in the room, and a huge sense of emptiness swept over me. The fact that he didn't understand my feelings at all almost brought tears to my eyes. At the end, my husband's cold attitude didn't change even after that, and our time together only lessened. We shared the same bed, but I always go to bed first. Even if I wait for him, he would simply say, "I'm tired," and go to sleep by himself. We were so close when we were dating. At this rate, things weren't going to get any better, so I decided to talk to my friend Linda. Linda and I have been friends since middle school, and we also went to high school together. She even gave a speech at my wedding. Basically, she's my best friend. When I explained the whole situation over the phone, Linda thought for a moment and then said, "Well, after my husband and I got married, we got more relaxed with each other too, you know." "Is that how it is?" "That's just how it is. Don't you feel relieved after getting married? Once you get your marriage certificate, it's not easy to get a divorce." "That might be true, but you don't feed the fish you caught, as they say. I think it's the same for all married couples." Linda got married a whole year before me, so her words were somehow convincing. I thought to myself, so that's how it is. But I was disheartened by the lack of romance in real life. Can I endure this marriage for the rest of my life? I couldn't quite say yes, although I tried to improve our relationship by talking to Bob. He continued to go on his business trips and worked overtime as usual. I couldn't even get him to sit down and talk with me. I spent my days in frustration. One day, I received a phone call from Linda. "Hello?" As soon as I answered the phone, she screamed out, "Sorry, Anne, I take back what I said." "Huh? Linda? What's wrong? You sound so frantic." "Just stay calm and listen to me carefully. Actually, I saw your husband shopping with another woman." "What?" Hearing the news, my mind went blank. While I was at a loss for words, Linda started to slowly explain the details. "I work part-time stocking shelves at a supermarket in the neighboring town, right? Your husband came here, arm in arm with a woman." "Arm in arm?" "Yeah. I was at work, so I couldn't take any pictures, but that was definitely your husband." "No way. I'll let you know if they come shopping again," she said, hanging up the phone, even after finishing the call with my best friend. My hands won't stop shaking. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I was at a loss for words. It can't be. Is Bob cheating on me? We've only been married for a month. But then again, there's no reason for Linda to lie to me. Our relationship was good until our wedding, and there was no sign of him seeing another woman. What made him change so suddenly? With no clue, my mind was in a mess. A few days later, Linda called and reported, "Your husband came again." And a few days later, she told me the days and times when the two of them were spotted at the supermarket, along with several photos for evidence. It seems that my husband and his lover are regular customers at the supermarket where Linda works. They must be getting groceries there to avoid running into acquaintances in our neighborhood. Since Linda is wearing a mask at work, my husband hasn't noticed her yet. He is confident that his infidelity has not been discovered and is brazenly enjoying shopping, linking arms, and holding hands. If they're buying groceries at the supermarket, it's almost certain they're going to his lover's house afterwards. To an outsider, they probably look just like a normal married couple. The fact that he was cheating filled me with sadness and anger. As I stared at the photos from Linda, I discovered a shocking fact. What is this? This has to be a joke, right? My husband's mistress was a friend from our college days. She was a woman named Monica, who was even at the after party of our wedding. At that moment, I felt as if something inside me had snapped. Thinking back, Bob and Monica had been close since college. Since we were in the same department, I of course knew her. However, no matter how close they are, having an affair is unacceptable. My sadness was replaced with anger and a growing sense of disgust towards my husband. I can't believe it. How far does he have to go to make a fool out of me? Cheating right after we got married. And with Monica of all people, I can't stand this. I won't let this slide. I'll make them pay for this. That's when I decided to get back at them. With Linda's advice, I decided to take action immediately. The plan was to catch them red-handed when they come to the supermarket. According to Linda, they go to the supermarket on Mondays and Thursdays. After discussing with her, we decided to execute the plan 2 weeks later on a Thursday. Luckily on that day, the supermarket was having a 5% sale for all the items, so the place was crowded. In other words, even if I caught them off guard, they wouldn't be able to cause a scene or run away. It was the perfect place and time to confront them. Until then, I decided to gather as much evidence of their affair as possible. The plan was to confront them at the very end, at the scene of their affair. While my husband was sleeping, I secretly borrowed his phone and checked his photo album. There, I found a picture of them barely clothed, smiling and looking happy together. If this was me a while back, even just one of these pictures would have brought me to tears. But now, I have no such feelings at all. Rather, I can use this as evidence to further corner them. The thought makes me shudder with anticipation. 2 weeks since then, the day for me to confront them finally came. After waiting in the shadows of a utility pole near the supermarket for about 10 minutes, as expected, Bob and Monica came out of the store. They were headed towards the parking lot, carrying their groceries. I boldly went up to them. Upon seeing me, Bob's face turned pale in an instant. Anne, why are you here?" His shoulders were shaking, and he muttered quietly. But I boldly retorted, "Why? It's obvious. I'm here to catch you two in the act of cheating." "No, it's not like that. I just happened to meet Monica here." "Don't play dumb. I know you two have been coming here almost every week." With that, I scattered the evidence I had collected in front of them. I could see the color drain from their faces as they saw me. Perhaps out of fear, tears welled up in Monica's eyes. My husband probably realized that he couldn't play dumb any longer, so he admitted it pretty quickly. To cut to the chase, my husband and Monica had been having an affair since right after our honeymoon. No, it would be more accurate to say that his feelings were already shifting towards Monica during our honeymoon. No wonder he didn't want to take photos with me. To make the matter worse, their affair started at our wedding's after party. My husband reunited with Monica, who attended as our mutual friend. She was single and apparently made the first move. They kept in touch since then, and they were even texting each other all the time during our honeymoon, which is shocking. All the pictures he made me take were for Monica. They officially started their relationship right after we returned from our honeymoon. While he was telling me he was working overtime or on business trips, they were meeting frequently like this, and he would spend the night at her place. Seeing my dumbfounded expression, my husband started with his pointless excuses. Yes, I did have a little fling with her, but I'm not serious about her. What? What are you saying now? I'll break up with Monica, so please forgive me. Forgive you? You're having an affair right after our wedding, and you got the nerves to say that? I beg you. We just had everyone celebrate our marriage. I can't bear the shame of them knowing that we're getting divorced. What? I was utterly disappointed. He didn't want to leave me, but it wasn't because he loved me. He was just worried about how others would perceive him. A guy that got divorced 2 months after getting married. He just didn't want to be labeled as such. I grabbed my husband's arm and dragged him to the parking lot. I shoved him into the passenger seat and started my car. Outside the window, Monica stood still with a completely drained look on her face. She seemed to want to say something, but I ignored her and drove off. I headed to my in-laws' house. Realizing where we were headed, he began to cry in the car, begging me, "Please, not my parents' house." Unfazed by my husband's pleas, I kept my foot on the gas pedal. I parked the car in my in-laws' driveway and dragged my crouched husband out of his seat. They were surprised by our sudden visit, but they led us into their living room saying, "Come in, guys." My in-laws, who knew nothing about the situation, especially my mother-in-law, who always showed affection towards me, started a pleasant conversation with a happy expression. "Anne, dear, it's been a while. Did you enjoy your honeymoon?" "Yes, it was our first time in Alaska, and we had a blast." As I responded cheerfully, my mother-in-law broke into a joyful smile. "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Do you have any pictures?" "Yes, we have plenty." While showing them the photos from our trip, I shared our Alaskan memories. After a while, my father-in-law, who had noticed something odd about my husband, quietly spoke up. "By the way, Anne, what brought you guys here today?" "Ah, right." Seeing the puzzled look on my father-in-law's face, I broke into a smile and dropped the bomb. "Today, I came to return Bob." "Huh? Return?" "Anne, dear, what did you just say?" "I said I'm returning him. Your son had an affair right after our wedding." "What? An affair?" "Wait, is this really true?" "Yes, indeed. And the other woman was a college friend who attended our wedding. I wonder how much more he plans to make a fool out of me." At this revelation, my in-laws' faces turned pale, as if they were about to faint. As for my husband, he was silent, looking as if all the blood had drained from his face. I put the divorce papers on the table, stood up and said, "I'm done with him." Then my husband shouted, "Wait, please, just rethink this. I will never cheat on you again, so please, anything but a divorce." "Right, divorcing just 2 months after getting married. It'd be too embarrassing to even leave the house, won't it?" No, it's not like that. I love you from the bottom of my heart, Anne." He appealed to me with tears in his eyes, but my feelings for him had already died, and I found him to be nothing but a nuisance. It was as if I was venting all the anger that had accumulated, and I looked down at my husband. "Quit it, you bastard. I love you from the bottom of my heart. Cut the crap. It's all your damn fault."
Anne,
"If you hadn't cheated, this all would have never happened. No matter how many times you apologize, I'll never forgive you. You're a piece of shit, and you should rot in hell. I'll make you pay for this with your whole life, you scumbag."
wait, Anne.
"Shut up. You brought this all upon yourself. Just go on and live your life worrying about others' judgment." With those words, I left my in-laws' house. Later on, I demanded alimony from him. With plenty of evidence, he wouldn't be able to wriggle out of it. He was obstinate for a while, but thanks to my lawyer, we managed to get a divorce. I was also able to receive a lump sum of alimony. Of course, I also demanded a lump sum of alimony from Monica, the woman he cheated on me with. He had used up almost all of his savings on our wedding and honeymoon, so it seemed he had to go into debt to pay the alimony to me. Later, Monica was so furious that she had been dumped by him, she stormed into his workplace. She dramatically exposed their affair to his colleague and boss. He had been glossing over the reason for our divorce as conflict of priorities and life goals. But thanks to Monica, it became widely known in the company that his infidelity was the cause. Obviously, he faced a storm of criticism from his colleagues, especially from the female employees. The criticism seemed to be explosive.
Bob, he always talked as if his wife was the problem. So it was actually his affair that led to his divorce, huh? That's so messed up.
Gosh, he's just plain gross. I would hate to be around him. I heard he got many cold stares at work, and people started to talk behind his back from his colleagues who had attended his wedding. There were even some who demanded, "Give us our gifts back." As a result, my husband found it unbearable to stay, and he resigned on his own. He can't even rely on his parents, as he got disowned by them, and now no one knows where he is or what he is doing. Well, I won't have anything to do with him ever again, so it doesn't really matter. As for me, I now commute to work from my parents' house and live my life as usual. My best friend Linda also contacts me frequently, so I'm spending my days cheerfully without being particularly depressed. The fact that my marriage ended terribly sucks. But life goes on. I hope to lead a good life in the future, and someday be able to laugh about this short-lived marriage.
You're off the job, so we're getting a divorce.
Get out now. I was flabbergasted as I was suddenly handed the divorce papers by my husband. Can you give me some time to think? When I asked this, my husband Paul granted me a grace period up until the next day and left the room. Upon checking the divorce papers, I noticed something written on the back. The moment I confirmed it, I immediately called the police. My name is Kathy. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. My husband Paul is 37 years old, and we've been married for 15 years. A few years into our marriage, I lost my uterus due to an illness, which brought up the topic of divorce.
Sure, I wanted kids, but I married you because I wanted to build a home with you, Kathy. So let's not divorce and live together,
said Paul when I was on the verge of falling into depression because I couldn't have children. Paul, being the youngest of 3 boys, had a father who was the CEO of a significant enterprise. After his father passed away, the eldest son took over the business. Things started to change for the usually kind Paul when he joined the family business at the request of his older brother. He used to come home on time, but around a year after he joined the company, he began coming home around midnight, saying he was working overtime, and he was often out of the house even on his days off, claiming he was working on weekends. Moreover, he began to avoid conversations with me. His expression lost its former cheerfulness, and he started showing a stern face towards me. No matter how many times I asked about it, I was brushed off with,
"It's nothing. It's not something I need to discuss with you, Kathy."
I started to feel suspicious about Paul's behavior and tried to have a discussion several times, but he found a way to refuse every time. I was sure something had happened either in the family business or at his parents' house. Did my mother-in-law say something to him? I started to think. There was a significant rift between me and my mother-in-law. She had harsh words for me because I couldn't bear children. "You're a barren woman. Why did you marry Paul? Get a divorce already. You're a nuisance." I was told these words every time we met, which eventually reached Paul's ears, and he was furious.
"If you say such things again, I will sever ties with this family."
Paul declared in a rage, and the matter was settled on the premise that I didn't have to deal with his parents' house. From then on, I distanced myself from the family, but I couldn't completely cut ties due to family gatherings and such. On such occasions, I had minimal greetings and conversations with my mother-in-law, trying not to show the overt estrangement to others. However, my mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me behind my back to the relatives, and a few of them who jumped on the bandwagon started to avoid me or chastise me as well. "Kathy, I heard you're taking advantage of Paul's kindness and telling him not to have any contact with his mother, even though you don't have any children. How dare you do such a thing as a wife?" I feel sorry that I can't have children, but as for my relationship with my mother-in-law, it was Paul who told me I didn't have to interact with her. I think digging up a problem that was resolved between the parties involved without understanding anything about it could lead to unnecessary misunderstandings and further strain relationships. The relative who seemed to be siding with my mother-in-law, who did not seem to expect a rebuttal, was taken aback by my words and attitude and quickly became angry.
You! How dare you act arrogant despite the fact that I'm kindly offering advice on family relations?
Excuse me, did my mother-in-law say that I'm useless because I don't have children?
Well, yes. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? I wonder why Paul married such an irresponsible woman like you, who can't do her job as a wife and can't even respect relatives and elders.
Why indeed? Oh, by the way, Paul has decided to cut ties with his family if his mother calls me things like useless for not having a child or stone woman. What will you do when that happens? Will you tell Paul about this? Can you take responsibility? When I brought up the issue of breaking off relations with Paul's family, the relative, who apparently didn't know about the situation, apologized in a small voice.
I'm sorry. I seem to have meddled unnecessarily out of concern for Paul's mother. I didn't mean to cause trouble, so could we pretend this never happened?
With that, she quickly left the scene. I was torn about whether to tell Paul, but decided to secretly tell only the mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, it seems you still have concerns about me not having children. I heard about it from a relative earlier. Should we have a thorough discussion again, with Paul involved? Upon hearing my words, my mother-in-law turned pale and refused to discuss it.
I'm sorry. It seems I conveyed the wrong message. I feel lonely about your and Paul's choice not to have children, but that's not to say I want to criticize it.
Since my mother-in-law apologized promptly, probably because she didn't want to break ties with Paul, I decided to keep this matter to myself. For several years, we enjoyed our life together without children. Then one day, my brother asked me to join the company. We're getting older, and I was thinking that we shouldn't change jobs at this stage, but they're really insisting. It doesn't seem to be because the company's in trouble or anything. Paul came to me with a proposition. In fact, I'm currently a housewife, but in my working days, I saw various companies in financial difficulty as a management consultant. So I quickly checked the state of Paul's family's company, but there didn't seem to be any problem with the management. When I told him this, Paul decided to work as an executive at the company that his eldest brother took over after hearing the detailed story from his second brother. The reason for the invitation was simply a shortage of personnel, as an employee in a similar position had retired due to illness. About a year later, there was a change in Paul's behavior. He started coming home late at night, and his attitude towards me became cold. There was an ominous atmosphere. And then Paul said to me, "The housekeeper who was working at my family home has apparently quit because of a sudden illness. Kathy, you seem to have a lot of time on your hands. Could you work at the family home as a housekeeper until we find a new one?" That's what I was asked. The news caught me off guard, but when I asked for more details, it turned out that the main job wasn't so much being a housekeeper, but taking care of the granddaughter living in my in-laws' house. Apparently, the parents of the grandchild were in the middle of a divorce, and while they were going through that, the grandchild was in the care of the in-laws. The housekeeper had been looking after her since the wife of the oldest son, her mother, had already passed away. The granddaughter was a 12-year-old girl named Harper. They wanted me to look after Harper and do the house cleaning and meal preparation while she was at school. Seeing the situation, I decided to take on the job after asking Paul more about Harper. Harper seemed to be a little shy around adults. At first, she was quite reserved with me, and we couldn't have much conversation. But about half a year later, she began to consult with me about things happening at school and her concerns. I was able to hear many other stories from her. To increase the time I could spend with Harper, I suggested to the oldest son that I could take care of her at my own home as well. But... "You're planning to kidnap Harper because you couldn't have a child, aren't you? If you won't do our cleaning and housework, you're not doing your job as a housekeeper. We will stop employing you." He shouted at me, and when my mother-in-law heard this,
"You're just now starting to want a child, Kathy. making Paul give up on having children, and now you're trying to take Harper. Harper is a girl, and even if you took her in, she would soon get married and waste Paul's money. We won't allow such a thing." I was rejected. Despite not suggesting to adopt Harper, the mother-in-law and oldest son exaggerated the story and blamed me because we don't have a child. Probably the mother-in-law doesn't want to keep Harper in the family line because she is a girl and can't be the successor. After the son and his wife's divorce, she definitely wants Harper's mother to have full custody. On top of that, she even told Harper, "You'll end up living in poverty with your mother. You shouldn't get used to living here. Kathy is already useless and brings no benefit to our family line." Harper was quite uncomfortable with my mother-in-law because of this. I was too astounded by this to say anything. I tried my best to keep Harper in good spirits while I was at the in-laws' house, making her favorite food and preventing her from interacting with my mother-in-law as much as possible. About a year later, I was told by Paul that there was something to discuss. When I arrived at the in-laws' house, Paul was waiting for me, sandwiched between the oldest son and the mother-in-law. "My eldest brother's divorce has been finalized, so you're no longer needed. We're getting a divorce too. Get out of this house as soon as possible." With those words, he handed me a completed divorce paper. I was shocked and said, "Please give me some time to think." I somehow managed to get the words out and returned home. Upon checking the divorce papers, I found a message from Paul on the back. Having seen this, I immediately reported it to the police, filled out the divorce papers, and went to submit them. A few days later, having moved to my new house and living alone, I was called to my in-laws' home due to a message from Paul. There, my mother-in-law, the eldest son, and Paul were waiting with stern faces. "How could you do this? You've taken away Harper's father, grandfather, and loving grandmother, and then you're pushing the child support on us?" Taken Harper's father away? Was he even being a proper father to Harper in the first place? And by loving grandmother, you mean you, right, mother-in-law? You said such harsh words, yet you dare to say something like this? "How can you say that? I was thinking about Harper." My mother-in-law started off by blaming me for my actions. I had been secretly recording as much as possible the verbal abuse and harsh treatment Harper received at my in-laws, and given it to the wife of the eldest son, who was in the midst of divorce mediation. Thanks to that, the custody was successfully transferred to the mother, and it seems that the mother-in-law was harshly blamed by her eldest son. "Do you think you can get away with this after what you did to my son's family?" "We're divorced, so it doesn't matter anymore." When I said this, Paul, who had been silent up until now, opened his mouth. "This isn't my family. I have nothing to do with you people anymore." "What are you saying? What do you mean?" As not only my mother-in-law, but also the eldest son were surprised by the words of Paul and me, we ended up explaining everything to them. Actually, this whole incident was a strategy to report tax evasion by the second son of my in-laws' family. Although the second son had been loved by his father, he was disliked by the eldest son and was pushed into an insignificant position after his father's death, with his salary significantly reduced. The second son, who had his own company, was looking for an opportunity to quit, but he suspected his elder brother of tax evasion, as unclear settlements and expenses increased in the company that the elder brother took over. In the process, it was found that my mother-in-law and the eldest son had been treating Harper terribly, so Paul asked me to take care of Harper. Harper's mother was trying to secure the custody, but she was being forced by my in-laws' family, who were aiming for child support, to take Harper away and create a parenting record, making it difficult to get the custody. The difference in opinions between my mother-in-law and the eldest son about this matter was exploited by the mother-in-law, who often said such words to Harper. I was recording these words as much as possible and documenting the toxic environment at my in-laws' family. I was collecting evidence so that the mother could win custody. It seemed that Paul's strange behavior was due to the illicit acts of my in-laws' family, the situation Harper was in, and his anger at the attitude of the mother-in-law and others. And he wanted to save Harper but couldn't do anything about it. He thought about consulting with me, but hesitated whether he should ask me
who doesn't have a child and had been blamed in the past at my in-laws' family to take care of the child at my in-laws' family. Paul revealed to me the entire situation after his parents' housekeeper quit. He asked for my cooperation, and I agreed without hesitation, springing into action. On the back of the divorce papers it was written, "Once preparations are completed, please report." Once I explained all this, the eldest son changed color and approached Paul.
"So, you guys reported it. What about the company? It's going to be ruined, isn't it?"
Paul calmly responded,
"It's okay. Our other brother will take it over. We have a good consultant for the company's rebuilding. You don't have to worry about anything. Just serve your time for your crimes. Thank you for all your efforts in tax evasion and fraud."
Paul then called somewhere.
"So, as decided at the general meeting, you're dismissed. It would really help if you could sell this house for debt recovery."
The second son entered the room with a few men. Alongside the second son were the cops. The eldest son and the mother-in-law, who were involved in tax evasion, were arrested on the spot for risk of absconding. Even as they were taken away, my mother-in-law, who was rude to me until the very end, made me laugh. Even if I can't have children, I've successfully dealt with the company's bankruptcy. I don't have to worry about being despised and disowned by my own child. Thank you very much for being such a good negative example. This seemed to hit her hard, and she left in silence. Paul and I entered the company that the second son bought from his parents, dealing with the illegal activities and unpaid wages accumulated by the mother-in-law and eldest son. We're working hard every day to recover the company. Even so, thanks to the remarkable skills of the brother, who had originally established and run his own company, it seems that we'll be able to rebuild much sooner than expected. Although I'd been away from the field for a long time, I feel fulfilled every day, reminding me of my active days. The sentence for the mother-in-law and the eldest son was heavier than usual, due to the large amount of tax evasion. Of course, the parents' in-laws' house was sold, and they were left penniless with nowhere to go. However, they won't know this for a while as they're still in police custody. Through a lawyer, I received several letters addressed to me from my mother-in-law. In them, she wrote things like "traitor," "destroyer of our home," or "I need your help as a family member. Didn't I accept you into our family even though you couldn't have children? Now can't you help me?" At first, I found it amusing to read these letters, but gradually I got tired of them and started to refuse to accept them. I'm occasionally in contact with Harper. I got a thank you message from Harper's mother for the support I'd been providing regarding Harper's upbringing. "Thanks to Kathy, not only me but also Harper's life was saved. Harper says you were the only one kind to her. Would you mind playing with her again?" Her words brought tears to my eyes, and then Harper, who was now on the phone, said,
"I want to eat Kathy's cooking again. Can you make it for me next time?"
This made me cry even more. Paul, who was nearby, was initially flustered, but burst into laughter when he heard Harper's voice on the phone, quickly arranging for us to meet. Since our new home was only about a 15-minute drive from Harper's, we started to interact more frequently. We're busy with work these days, but once things settle down, I'm thinking of inviting Harper and her mom for a vacation. Even though Harper is not our child, I'm looking forward to watching her grow up close by.
You're getting married? It all started one day at our usual dinner table. My oldest son, Brad, started off by saying he had something to tell me. My name is Mary. I'm 51 and I work part-time. I still feel young mentally, but there's nothing I can do about physically getting old. But my sons, who have grown up to cover for my declining energy, are my pride and joy. Brad, my eldest of 3 sons, has decided to get married. I knew he had a girlfriend, but it's finally happening.
So Brad is getting married, huh? That means you're getting old, honey.
Well, I guess no beer for you tonight, then?
Just kidding.
I ignored my husband's stupid joke and looked at my son's face. The other 2 are away in college, so the only one living at home is Brad, who's now working. He's matured a lot in his 3rd year of work. Since deciding to get married, he seems even more manly and dependable than ever before.
Tonight, we will toast in celebration.
After my husband tearfully apologizes to me, saying,
I'm sorry, you're forever young and beautiful.
I granted him a single bottle of beer. According to my son, they are at the stage of discussing things like checking out wedding venues and deciding on a ring. The actual date is still up in the air. First, he said he wanted to bring his fiancée over to meet us. Marriage is a significant milestone in life, after all. I want them to have a wonderful ceremony. I know the stars of the show are my son and his wife-to-be, but I'm feeling a bit excited. Maybe I'll even get a new dress. My husband is going on about how beautiful I was in my bridal gown. Maybe I'll treat him to some more snacks. Then the weekend came. My son's future wife arrived.
Hello, I'm Alice.
I was surprised at the casual greeting, but I guess that's just how young people are these days. Alice was a part-time employee at my son's favorite cafe. She was smitten with my son, and after a determined pursuit, they started dating. As the conversations came to a pause, my husband turned to me and said,
Ah, yes.
I nodded back at him.
We have something important to tell you, Alice.
The three of us, my husband, myself, and our son, had discussed this and decided to tell her.
The truth is, Brad isn't our biological son.
Alice's eyes widened in surprise at these words. It must be a shock.
He's my nephew. Brad is my brother and his wife's only child. But they passed away in an accident when he was very young, so we adopted him. But he's like a son to us. We consider him our eldest. Please, take good care of our son.
As my husband and I smiled, she fell silent. Perhaps she was struggling to respond.
Well, let's leave the heavy stuff there. So, when and what kind of ceremony are you thinking?
My husband ended the somber topic with a cheerful smile and switched to a brighter topic.
I would like to wear a traditional white wedding dress if possible.
As she said this, she looked at my son's face. My son smiled brightly and nodded. Oh, that sounds wonderful. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, so it needs to be perfect for the bride, I said, at which point Alice pulled a strange face. For a moment, I thought she was glaring at me. Was it my imagination? Before I could ponder further, her face had already returned to its usual expression.
And what about you, Brad? What kind of wedding do you want?
No, we don't need your opinion.
Alice immediately responded when my husband tried to engage our son in the wedding talk.
What?
The three of us were surprised and looked at Alice, who seemed puzzled by our reactions, as if she couldn't comprehend what was wrong with her statement.
But you said it yourself, didn't you, Auntie, that it needs to be perfect for the bride? The groom is just a bonus. I'll have it my way.
Her radiant smile left Brad speechless, and I was taken aback by her calling me Auntie.
But surely Brad's wishes should be considered too.
No worries, leave everything to me, and it'll be the best wedding ever. Just make sure you work hard and contribute the funds, Brad.
Her unstoppable energy and audacity left us all speechless.
What a remarkable girl.
And all I could do was nod in agreement. A few days later, we had a meeting with both families at a nice restaurant. This time my husband's mother was present too. She wasn't able to join us last time because she was at an adult daycare center. She was excited to meet her grandson's fiancé, and despite using a cane, she was quite energetic.
Sorry for the delay, traffic was a nightmare.
Alice talked in a really casual way even though we had only met once. I noticed our parents in the background. They both shyly waved and quickly took their seats. The atmosphere was somewhat awkward. Without much conversation, we all quietly ate our meals. It was the moment I drew a breath to make some small talk. Alice suddenly spoke up.
Granny, do you have trouble walking?
That's right, dear. Old age has taken a toll on my legs.
I absolutely refuse to care for you,
Alice declared out of the blue, causing a moment of stunned silence. Someone went, "Huh?" It was probably my mother-in-law, but it could also have been me.
I want to make it clear I have no intention of caring for any of you. Auntie, you're not my mother, right? That makes you a stranger. And while Uncle might be related, he's not my father. I won't look after any of you.
Hey, Alice. Brad attempted to rein her in, but she wouldn't stop.
And I definitely won't be calling you Dad or Mom, so remember that.
I glanced at Alice's parents, taken aback to see them both nodding in agreement. Well, it's true that Brad isn't our biological son, but we raised him like one.
Hush, Uncle.
Okay, I'm sorry. My husband fell silent after being sharply rebuked by her. Pathetic. It was at that moment the sound of a fork being gently placed down resonated.
Is that so?
A calm single statement. I carefully glanced at my mother-in-law. She seemed composed, but you could tell she was furious.
They may not be their biological parents indeed, but they've raised them with more love than real parents would have. That's not something outsiders should meddle with. I don't care what you say. I'm not doing caregiving.
It infuriated me, but I held my tongue as my mother-in-law continued to speak.
I'm not expecting anyone to take care of me. I know I'm old, but I don't want to burden my daughter-in-law, so I use the facilities mostly every day. Oh, really? And? I've already transferred my assets to the couple as gifts while I'm still alive. They can use that money to go to the facilities or do whatever they want, so you won't have to lift a finger.
Well, isn't that nice? She responds to my mother-in-law with irritated replies. Even when her son tried to chide her, it was like water off a duck's back.
This discussion ends here. It's time to go home.
With a single statement from my mother-in-law, the meeting came to an end. Women have become stronger these days. Perhaps that's the way of the world now. The rest of us, born in the 60s, were left with mixed feelings as we returned home. A few days later, my husband and Brad were at work. My mother-in-law was at the adult home, and I was alone at home with a day off from my part-time job. The phone rang at that moment.
Oh, hey there, Auntie.
To my surprise, it was Alice on the line.
Hey, Auntie, can you not show up at the wedding?
What? I let out a surprised cry at her unexpected request.
You're not Brad's real parent. You're technically his aunt, but you don't have any blood relation, so you're essentially a stranger. Strangers don't come to weddings.
But what about Brad?
He doesn't matter. I told you, I'm doing the wedding my way. At the ceremony, I'll be preparing a letter to his deceased parents. That'll surely move everyone.
That's not how it works. Brad's biological parents were indeed important to him, but he wanted us, his parents, to be at the ceremony. He told us that he thinks of us as his real parents, which brought tears to our eyes before.
If you really want to attend, you'll have to be super generous with your gift. You received an inheritance from your mom, right? So $10,000 is the bare minimum. If that's the case, I might let you sit in the far corner of the relative seats.
How could you say such a thing?
If you don't like it, fine. Don't come to the wedding. Oh, but you still have to give a gift. Wire transfer or registered mail is fine. Bye.
She hung up the phone as if she had said everything she needed to say. It was like a whirlwind of a phone call. That night, Brad was going to be late due to overtime, and my husband was out for drinks. It was just me and my mother-in-law at home. A quiet strategy meeting time. Alice seems to dislike me.
That's a problem.
My mother-in-law sighed at my words. Let's make her like us then. Simple and clear. If we're disliked, we'll make ourselves liked. And so my mother-in-law and I stayed up late into the night, hatching various plans. The sight of us grinning in satisfaction, saying, "Perfect, let's do this," made my husband, who had just come home, dumbfounded, but that's another story.
Here to collect some cash.
The next day at lunch, when I called Alice and told her we had something to give her, she came right away. Does she think every gift is cash? Shaking my head, I pulled out something.
What's this? It's a cupcake I made,
said my mother-in-law with a smile.
I heard that you don't have grandparents. Try some of this. It's a super traditional one. I don't want it. Don't be shy. Here you go. No, I'm good.
After a back and forth between Alice and my mother-in-law shoved the treat into Alice's mouth. My mother-in-law's assertiveness is definitely her strength.
Whoa, that's gross. Why is this so salty?
Alice shouted, quickly gulping down the iced tea we served.
Salty? That's odd. It shouldn't be.
Perhaps you confused the sugar with salt. I also took a bite and grimaced. We had left everything to my mother-in-law, apart from the preparations and cleanup. But who could have predicted such a basic blunder? The cupcake plan had failed. But that's all right. Let's move on to the next plan. I have a gift for you.
Wedding money? A gift card?
Nope. What I handed her was a slightly larger paper bag. Looking at it, it was clear it didn't contain money, causing a frown to crease Alice's forehead.
What's this?
It's a dress. I hope you like it.
It's gross. This isn't my taste at all. I would rather have money. Money!
When she's this blunt about wanting money, it makes you not want to give it to her. I seriously thought about the dress that looked good in her. Not having a daughter, I'm not really familiar with the fashion trends for young women these days. I had consulted with the store clerk, but it seemed like it wasn't successful. It's a real blow. And another failed plan. It feels like we didn't get closer, but rather things got even worse.
That's enough. I don't want anything else. Just give me the cash. A cash gift is what represents the spirit of celebration. Don't you want to celebrate your son?
Of course I do. Then I'll give it to my son.
The wife should manage the husband's money. That's only natural. Just hurry up and hand it over, old woman.
So this is her true nature, I thought, feeling saddened. Is my son really going to marry her?
Who are you calling an old woman? I'm still spry. You're an old woman just by saying spry. Actually, you're a granny.
Alice was saying whatever she wanted. As I wondered what to do, I was suddenly surprised by a voice saying, "I'm home."
Brad? Wait, what happened at work?
Alice started to panic. She was probably worried about being overheard. We went bankrupt.
Huh? Did your father do something?
Alice's misunderstanding echoed throughout the room, followed only by silence. Bankrupt. The company. It's gone under.
Bankrupt? Gone under what?
It wasn't just Alice that was surprised. My mother-in-law and I were both taken aback. Alice grabbed my son's slumped shoulders and started shaking him.
What does bankrupt mean? Jobless? Penniless? What are we going to do about the wedding?
I'm sorry, it'll have to wait. Releasing her grip from my son, who answered listlessly, Alice stood dumbfounded, and then she cried out.
Then how am I supposed to pay the damages?
Now it was my mother-in-law and I who were taken aback at these words. My son being jobless was one thing, but I couldn't keep up with what was happening anymore. Damages?
Ah, never mind. Just give me the gift money quickly.
Seems she no longer cared if my son was present. She held out her hand to me. My mother-in-law addressed her.
Alice, could you give us an explanation? Shut up. Just give me the money. Alice. Shut up. It's you who needs to shut up, young lady. Explain yourself.
Was this my mother-in-law's true colors? Her tone had suddenly changed from calm to harsh, and Alice was taken aback. And so, under the gaze of the snake-like mother-in-law duo, Alice started to speak in a weak voice. Apparently, Alice had been having an affair with her boss at her part-time job. Moreover, the guy was married. His wife found out and is demanding damages. But she had no money. So she thought about marrying my son. She had calculated that if they married, she would receive a hefty amount in gift money, and planned to have my son pay for all the wedding costs, while she would keep all the gift money. My mother-in-law and I were speechless. Of course, we were angry that she had used my son, but we were also astounded by how she didn't think she had done anything wrong,
throughout the entire conversation.
I've already ended it with my boss. Once I pay the damages, it'll be over. That's why I'm going to continue with the marriage. Give me the gift money.
It's a good thing the truth came out before the wedding, but I didn't know what to say to her. As I was worrying, I heard a low, muffled voice.
Don't make decisions on your own.
Looking up, I saw my son Brad glaring at Alice. His face was full of rage.
You had an affair and yet you think you can make all the decisions?
Alice probably never thought she would be shouted at. Brad is usually so calm. He's probably never raised his voice at her. Alice gave a small start.
So what if it's over? You're not even trying to pay the damages yourself. You were trying to use our marriage to your advantage. You haven't shown any remorse. Do you really love me?
Of course I love you. That's why I want to get married.
Then pay the damages yourself. Show some sincerity.
But... Alice tried to cling to my son, but he coldly pushed her away.
Either way, we can't get married until I find a new job. Can you wait until then?
She was at a loss for words. If she truly loved him, she would be able to wait. She would say she would support him. But those words didn't come from her.
What's enough is enough.
Out came her words of frustration.
Enough? I never even liked you to begin with. I thought you could bring in some money, but I don't need a jobless, penniless man.
At last, Alice showed her true colors. Perhaps that was her true feelings. She shouted and left the house. Was Brad really okay with this? I noticed Brad shaking when I turned around. Is he crying? Just as I was about to reach out to comfort him. My son suddenly burst out laughing. Was he broken from the shock? It was a lie.
Huh? A lie?
The company's not bankrupt. Business is doing well. I just came back to pick up something I forgot.
Turns out the bankruptcy was a lie. In reality, my son had come home during his lunch break to pick up something he had forgotten. He saw the three of us there together and listened to our conversation. My son, suspicious of Alice, who kept insisting on money, had set a trap for her.
I'd heard that when a lover becomes jobless and penniless, their true nature shows. I wanted to test it.
And the result was damning, to say the least.
Don't you love her?
I asked. My son looked a little sad.
I loved her enough to want to marry her, but you can fall out of love in an instant. Maybe in that sense, I didn't love Alice all that much either.
In that case, it might have been for the best that the engagement was called off. I exchanged a look with my mother-in-law and we both found ourselves laughing. As for what happened after, it seems the cafe where Alice was working part-time went out of business. Apparently the manager, who was Alice's affair partner, had to give up the cafe to pay for the alimony following a messy divorce. This was information from another regular customer at the cafe, as told by Brad. As for Alice, she had no means to pay the alimony herself and had to ask her parents. They were furious with her and kicked her out of the house. She's living in a rundown apartment, working a night job. That's what we heard from her parents. A few years later, by the time my two younger sons had started working, Brad was getting married. His partner is a very nice woman.
Thank you for raising Brad into a wonderful man. I'm not much, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you two better.
Even knowing the truth, she thanked us like that, and both my husband and I were moved to tears. Seeing us like that, Brad gave a big smile. Congratulations, Brad. I'm sure your parents in heaven are also happy. When I said that, my wonderful son smiled softly and said, Yes, but I'm happy if my parents in front of me are also happy. At his words, I found myself crying again. Oh dear, here come the tears again.
You're crying too much. You've aged and gotten so tearful.
When my husband said that, I told him he wasn't going to be having beer tonight.
My name is Trisha. My husband Brett and I have been married for 3 years. We built our own home right after we got married. We are currently living with Brett's mother. She raised him as his only parent. The decision to live together was made primarily due to Brett's strong wish to make his mother's life easier, who had been a single mother, and her unwillingness to live alone, despite my apprehensions about living with my strong-willed mother-in-law. Living together was as terrible as I had imagined. I soon found that the time I spent at work was my only respite. It's my responsibility to do the grocery shopping after work and prepare dinner. My mother-in-law basically doesn't do any housework. I'm using the kitchen right now. Can you wait a bit? But I need to start making dinner soon. I'll be done in a little bit. Just wait for me. Okay, I understand. Why is there only one kitchen even though we live together? When we suggested a two-family house, you refused, remember? Did I? I was probably being considerate then. The house would have been more expensive if we had chosen a two-family house, wouldn't it? That's true, but in hindsight, it might have been better to at least have two kitchens. I thought so too, but I was being patient. You should be thankful to me for that. Is that so? I thought you refused the two-family house because you didn't want to be alone. That's not the case. If I could, I would have preferred a two-family house. Should we consider renovating then? Fine by me, but I can't pay for it. But if we do, we would need some financial support from you as well. I have no intention to work anymore, and I spent a lot of money on Brett being a single mother, so I hardly have any retirement saving. Therefore, I can't contribute. But Brett and I are paying for all the household expenses, including the mortgage and utilities. If you want a two-family house, we would need your help. I don't have any money to spare. I spent all my money on Brett. Brett is working at a good company, so he should pay me back more than I spent on him. If that's the case, we'll have to cooperate and get along from now on. Why do I have to be told what to do by you? If you earn more money, you can afford to renovate, can't you? I'm not telling you what to do, and I don't think my salary is going to increase any further, so please don't count on me. Even though Brett makes a high salary, because he married you with your low income, we can't live comfortably at all. What are you trying to say? Sometimes I can't help but think it would have been nicer if Brett had married someone better. Is that so? You're able to live because of my son, whom I've raised so carefully, so don't get too big for your britches. I'm working too, you know. I know exactly how much you make. You should be more grateful to my high-earning son. I am grateful, but what? You're living off the money my son earned, so don't complain about this and that. I might be relying on him, but I do earn my own money as well. Enough! Enough! Why are you so angry? If you were highly paid, I wouldn't have to put up with these hard days. That's why I'm irritated. Even if you tell me that now... Why do I have to live alone with you every day? Because Brett is on a business trip. We have no choice. He's almost never home for the past 3 years. It's his job, so we can't help it. He didn't go on business trips before marriage. Why did this happen? Because he changed jobs. But it's the same profession, right? Can the conditions change that much? It seems like a company with a lot of business trips. I'd rather live alone than this. If you hate living with just the two of us that much, why don't you live alone? Are you going to pay for my living expenses? Then maybe I'll do that. Why don't you ask Brett? Brett will definitely want to live with me. That may be true. I'll talk to him when he comes back on the weekend. During the week, Brett is away on business trips, so it's usually just me and my mother-in-law staying in the house we built. Even though I felt discontented, I tried my best not to cause a conflict, but it seems that Trisha also dislikes living with me. We decided to discuss it when Brett comes home. It doesn't seem to work out with the three of us, so I talked to Brett first. Your mom said she doesn't like living with just me. What? Why? She doesn't like that you're not at home because of your business trips. Well, I can't help it. It's my job. She said she'd rather live alone than live with just me. What? It's your fault for making Mom say that. Why is it my fault? If you got along with her, she wouldn't have said such things. I bet you're just giving her lip, aren't you? No, that's not the case. I've been cooking meals and doing all the house chores properly. Well, that's expected, isn't it? What do you mean by that? Mom has been through a lot raising me. I want her to have an easier time now. And that's why I'm trying to do right by her. Do right by her? House chores are your responsibility. What's with that attitude? Please get along with Mom better. I'm doing my best, but if it's causing stress for both of us, maybe it would be better for her to live on her own. What a waste of money that would be. Well, yes, but maybe we should have built a duplex then. We can't afford a renovation now. If you could just curb your spending habits a bit, that wouldn't be a problem. Why is it always my fault? You're receiving extra for business trips, so instead of wasting it on slot machines, why not put it towards our living expenses? We'll be able to afford a renovation then. I don't want to do that. Slot machines are my only joy during those trips. What are we supposed to do being stressed out then? All you need to do is put in more effort, and we'll get along, like a real family. That's easy for you to say, but it's not easy to build a real familial bond with your in-laws, you know? You can say that after you've put in the effort. What's that supposed to mean? I'll ask Mom to be a bit more patient with you. Patient? It sounds like you're saying it's all my fault. Man, this is such a hassle. Your job is twofold. To get along with Mom and to take care of the house. I'm counting on you when I'm not home. It seems Brett had spoken to my mother-in-law because she eventually gave up on the idea of me moving out. However, things got even worse after that conversation. One day at dinner, just the two of us again. I don't want this. It tastes bad. What's wrong? You've been very picky lately. Brett told me something. What was it? He said that I should get along better with you. I see. He told me that I should speak my mind and not hold back. Is that so? He said that if I lived as if you were my own daughter, my stress would disappear. So I decided to stop holding back. Even if I didn't want to eat something, I had been eating it anyway. But I decided to stop that too. So that's what it was. From that day forward, my mother-in-law became more and more selfish. My stress piled up higher than ever. Whenever I tried to discuss it with Brett, he would just say that I wasn't trying hard enough and wouldn't help me at all. I finally reached my breaking point. By the way, did you clean the bathroom yesterday? Yes, I did. You left it dirty. After hearing that from my mother-in-law, who had just gotten out of the bath, my anger reached its peak. I'm sick and tired of being nagged about these little things every single day. Huh? Brett told me to treat you like my real daughter, so that's what I'm doing. Real daughter? I don't remember becoming your daughter. What's with that attitude? I think you're mistaking me for a servant, not a daughter. Well, now that you mention it, you do seem like a servant. I'm not your servant. Then why don't you leave? That's what I should be saying. What? Do you really plan on kicking me out, even though you don't contribute to living expenses? Of course! Brett is the head of this household. But I'm Brett's wife. What are you talking about? I am Brett's mother. Do you think a wife has a higher status? It's not about status, or anything like that. Then what is it? Do you think Brett will choose you? I think Brett will choose you, mother-in-law, because he cherishes you so much. That's more like it. Are you really sure it's okay if I leave? Why worry? It'll definitely be okay without you. I'd feel relieved, actually. Is that so? Even if it might make things financially difficult, it's okay? Huh? Why worry? It's none of your business. I understand. Brett earns $70,000 annually. We're comfortable, so stop undermining us. I'm not undermining. I'm just worried. There's no reason for you to worry. Stop belittling us. Get a divorce, quickly! Understood. There seems to be no need to discuss this with Brett. I will pack my things and leave promptly. Ah, finally! The nuisance is gone. Several days later, I left without saying anything to Brett. If I had consulted with Brett, who adores his mother, I am the one who is to be blamed. As if to prove it, there was no contact from Brett, who must have returned from his business trip. And I decided to divorce. I would meet with Brett alone. Dude, I told you to get along with Mom. Why did you fight? It seems you're only siding with your mother, making everything my fault. What? You want to say you were harassed by Mom? Let's not. There's no need to argue here. I've already decided to get a divorce. Wait, are you intending to divorce me? Yes? Did you think we weren't going to divorce? Well, we're not on bad terms or anything. There's no way I can continue to live with a mother-in-law like that. And you, Brett, you're a mama's boy who has no intention of helping me. I'm not a mama's boy. You're nothing but a mama's boy. Is that so? Your mother is all about you, Brett. It's mutual love, so enjoy it. Hey, you must be kidding me. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness. We completed our divorce papers without any issue, and we were divorced. The house was mortgaged under Brett's name, so it became his. Then, just a month after our divorce, I got a call from Brett. He said he had something he wanted to discuss with me, including his mother, so I reluctantly went to meet them. Wait a minute! What's going on? Why are you being so emotional all of a sudden? Don't play innocent! Excuse me? We can't make ends meet with Brett's earnings alone. Well, of course you can't. What do you mean? We used to pay for our living expenses with my earnings as well. And he's bringing home less than I thought. Not even $70,000 a year. It seems like you were mistaken, mother-in-law. What do you mean? The one making $70,000 a year is me. What? Then how much does Brett make? Brett used to earn around $50,000 a year before he changed jobs, but it dropped significantly after that. I didn't know that. Well, it's not a surprise you didn't know. It's not something we would necessarily tell you. Even so, his take-home pay is way too low. That's because his salary is being deducted for his gambling debts. What? That's why his take-home pay is significantly less, and I had to supplement the shortfall with my salary. Why didn't you tell me sooner? No, I did tell you. I warned you that it would be financially tough. But then, you told me it was none of your business. Well, I didn't say anything because I thought it would be bothersome to you. He seems to be gambling every day on his business trips, too. Brett has a gambling addiction, you know. We managed to pay this month's gas, water, electricity, and everything else, but I don't think we can pay them from next month. That sounds tough. It's hard, so come back. What are you talking about? Marry him again and come back. That's way too convenient for you. If you come back, I promise I won't meddle or complain anymore. I apologize for everything in the past. Please! That's impossible, I'm afraid. At that point, Brett, who had been silent all along, spoke up. I didn't know anything about the money situation either. I bet. I thought we were making do with just my salary. There's no way that was possible. I feel guilty for always siding with my mother. Can't we start over? Being able to leave a gambling addict was a relief, so remarrying is absolutely out of the question. What's with that attitude? Moreover, I can't handle a mama's boy. Don't say such things! You two are in love, so why not work together and give it your all? You should be able to make it. I beg you! Are we done with this topic? If so, I'd like to leave soon. It's my day off and I have things to do. Please come back home. If you don't, I'll be the one who has to work. Please work hard and support Brett. I'm counting on you. Ignoring their pleas for reconciliation, I went home. I had kept their contacts in case something happened, but I took this opportunity to block them and delete their contacts. I requested a transfer to a store near my parents' house, and I moved into an apartment close by. Brett's house is about a 2-hour drive away, and Brett dislikes my father, so he probably won't come to this area. Half a year later, I worked at the previous store near Brett's house for the first time in a while as part of a support team. I was curious and passed by their house, only to find a surprising sight. The house was up for sale. They must have been unable to make the payment. And then, while I was at work, I saw my mother-in-law, and she noticed me and approached me. I finally found you! What's going on? I thought we might meet if I waited here. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was working at the supermarket next to the cell phone shop where I worked. Are you working? You can tell by looking! So you're working here in hopes of seeing me? That's right! I wanted to ask you to come back home as soon as I saw you. Are you still saying that? I have no intention of returning. Don't say that! We had to sell our house and can't live there anymore. I see. We're somehow managing to live in a small apartment, just the two of us. Well, that's good. You're living happily with your beloved son. Don't mock me! And Brett has a part-time job. He often doesn't come home on his days off. We barely have any time to talk. Is that so? Brett must be having a hard time. I didn't want to work anymore, but look at me now! You're having a tough time too. But please, continue to support Brett. I can't do it! Please, won't you consider reconciling? Stop being so persistent. I've told you, it's impossible. Don't say that, please. I have to get back to work. I don't have time to engage in pointless conversations. It's not pointless. For me, it's a pointless conversation. I wish you and Brett a long and happy life together. Wait a minute! Apparently, the two of them who sold the house are now living in a small apartment. As far as I know, they still have 2 years left to repay their gambling debts, so they'll probably live hand-to-mouth until then. I hope they can work together and overcome this. As for me, I'm doing my job every day with energy and enjoyment. Things have been going well for me since the divorce. Good things come in bunches, and I'm grateful to be dating a wonderful man right now. I want to be happy next time.